Hello, and welcome to the second meeting of the Spellfire Club, where we talk about anything and everything Dungeons and Dragons. Now, in the first meeting, we started to roll up a first level character using 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons rules. That entailed rolling ability scores, and then picking where those scores went based on the class that we picked, which was Barbarian, and then also modifying those ability scores based on the race that we picked, and we end up with Mountain Dwarf. Once we did that, we were pretty much done. So we knew what class we were, we knew what race we were, we had our ability scores, and we figured out all the modifiers for those ability scores. Now we move on to the next stage, which is figuring out your saving throws, your skills. A little bit, I threw in little things like, how fast you are, and what your initiative modifier is, what your proficiency bonus and stuff is. And then also a little bit about what armor you can use and the weapons that you can use. But we didn't pick armor and weapons, and we didn't do anything about with your background, because that takes a little while. So we're going to do that in another episode. Probably the next one will be the armor, I would think, and the weapons. And then the final one will be the background. And you'll see what those backgrounds do to your character. And they just add a little bit of flavor to your character. So without further ado, let's get rolling. All right, welcome back. We are on the second stage of making our first level character for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Last time what we did is we rolled 4 6-sided die. We dropped the lowest, we added the other ones together, and we wrote it down on a sheet of scratch paper. And that became one of our ability scores. And we did that 6 times. And then we took those 6 scores and figured out how to assign them to the character's abilities based mostly on their class. In this case, we picked Barbarian. And then after we had assigned all those skills, or those ability scores, we picked our race. And in this case, we decided on Mountain Dwarf, which gave us a +2 to Strength and a +2 to Constitution, which we wrote. Now, the important thing, this +2 isn't this +2. It's a +2 to the score that you rolled, right? So originally, this dwarf's strength was a 15, so we'd assign one of these 15s here. And we assigned the other 15 to this dwarf's Constitution. So it's in this little bubble, we wrote a 15. Then once we decided to make him a Mountain Dwarf, we came back through and added 2 to this and made this a 17. And we made this a 17 for Constitution. And then we went through and figured out your ability modifier. So this +3 is called the modifier, whereas the roll that you actually have is called the ability score. So he has a 17 ability score, and when we look it up on our chart in our player's handbook here, we find out that a 17 gives you a certain ability modifier. And in this case, it's on page 13. Yep. And in this case, we find that a 17 gives you a modifier of +3. So there's a score and a modifier. You roll your ability score with a dice, and then that gives you your modifier. That was confusing when I was working with some people trying to make up their character. They got that kind of confused. So I'm like, okay, well, you should definitely point that out. Now, in the last video, what I said I was going to do is I was going to show you what I do next when I make a character, which is true. I normally do this next, but it opened a can of worms. What I normally do next is I pick the background, because that'll give you a couple skills, and then when you go to make up the rest of your character, you know not to pick those skills. But that background actually opens up a can of worms in that it then leads you into these personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, and features and traits and stuff that you might get from it. So that kind of opened up a can of worms that you don't need to open to get a character like playable right away. And so I'm not going to cover that. So I lied in the last video. I'm going to show you the next step that you should take in order to make your character playable, so that if you go over to a friend's house or something like that, and it's you're rolling up a first character or whatever, and you want to get playing right away, you can get going at it super fast. So the first thing you do is roll all the ability scores and assign it like we've done. Now, the next thing you want to do is you can fill in this proficiency bonus, which is right here, because for every class, every race, whatever, the proficiency bonus is always a +2 at first level. So you can put a +2 there, and we'll describe what that does for you in just a second. The next thing you can do is fill in your saving throws. And saving throws are things that you'll do in the game to like avoid something, or usually it's avoiding something. That's why it's called a saving throw. And the way to find out what your saving throw is you go to the class that you picked. In this case, we picked Barbarian. So we go to the Barbarian class, and we go over here. Get rid of this actually, because we don't need that anymore. We go over here to class features, And they tell you your hit points, your proficiencies, and here it says saving throws, and it says strength and constitution. So essentially, those are the ones that we are proficient in. So as a barbarian, we're very good. I'm just going to put this up here so you can see a little better. We are very good at things that require strength, saving throws, and constitution. So saving throws require strength and constitution. In other words, like, oh no, you know, somebody throws a rock at you and you've got to like jump and shove it out of the way or something. If that's a saving throw of strength, then you are going to be better at it than normal. So how you fill in the saving throws is the ones that you are shown as being proficient in, based on your class of barbarian, you fill the little circle in next to it, showing that you're proficient in it. And then when you go to calculate what your modifier is for that, you take the strength saving throw and you go over to your strength modifier, and it's a +3. But you're proficient in it, right? Because that's what the barbarian class, one of the proficiencies for saving throws is strength. So you go up and add your proficiency bonus to your strength bonus. So he has a +3 and a +2, so he has a +5. That's actually really good. Now for dexterity, he's not proficient in it, so you just go to your dexterity modifier and you write that in. So he has a +2 for dexterity, so we're going to put +2 here. Now for constitution, he is proficient. So we take your constitution modifier, which is a +3, and then we add your proficiency, which is a +2, so it's +3, +2, +5. We write that in there. The next is intelligence. We have a +0, so, and we're not proficient, so we just add the +0 in there. Wisdom, we're not proficient in it, so we just take the wisdom score, which is a +1. And then charisma, we are not proficient, and we have a charisma of +0. Great. Now our saving throws are done. That's why I like to do this next step if you're going to be playing, because you use saving throws in the game, you know, a decent amount. Now, the next section that you can fill in is initiative, because this is used in the game all the time, anytime you get in combat. And that's really easy. You just go over here to your dexterity modifier, and you put that in. So initiative, he has a +2 for initiative when it comes to combat. His speed, right, which is important to figure out how far you can move in a round or whatever, is based on your race. So he's a mountain dwarf. So let's flip back to mountain dwarf real quick. Here's dwarf. And if you go to page, let's see, there's dwarf names, abilities. Here, dwarf traits. This is on page 20 in my book. There's the ability score increase, which we've already done. And down here, size, which you can fill in on other sheets. Here's your speed. Your base walking speed is 25 feet. So what you write in here for speed is 25. So that's how far you can move in feet in one combat round. All right, next is hit points. That's certainly important, so we'll do that next. So your hit points are based on your class. So we're a barbarian. And so in our case, we're going to take this hit point section here. It's on page 47, and it says your hit points at first level is 12 plus your constitution modifier. So this is actually cool because in the old version I used to play 2nd edition. And the way you would roll actually a d12 at the beginning for your hit points. And if you end up with a 1, well, guess what? You were a barbarian with 1. Oh, I rolled a 12. Never happened before. Anyways, if you rolled a 1, your barbarian would be super cool, but you have 1 hit point, which is terrible. So this is cool. In the 5th edition, you start with a maximum hit points that you can get based on your hit dice for that class. And so for the barbarian, the hit dice is 1d12, so the max you could get would be 12. So they give that to you, and then they say add in your constitution modifier. And so we look for our modifier, not our score or anything, but our modifier. So here we find constitution, modifier is a +3. So we take 12 plus 3, and we write in here at hit point maximum, 12 plus 3, which is 15. That's a ridiculous number of hit points for first level characters. So that's great. So we write that in there. This box here below that is where you're going to write, if you take damage, you'd have your max of 15, and let's say somebody, shot you with an arrow and you took 3 points of damage, you'd write 12 here. And then when you took more damage, you cross out the 12 and write 10 or whatever else your remaining hit points were, and then all the way down to 0, right? So that's what this space is for the hit points that you have after taking damage and stuff in the game. All right, so but now we know our maximum hit points. We know our initiative modifier. We know how fast we move, right? Those are all great. The other one you can fill in right now, since you're on this page, is hit dice, and it has total at the top, and then hit dice. So your hit dice is this line right here that we just read. 1d12. And then the number of hit dice you can actually get from, where is it? I don't know where the hit dice thing is. But at first level, you always start with 1 hit die. And what this comes in to play, how this comes into play in the game is that when you get injured in 5th edition, you can sort of take a short rest, which is like take an hour break and tend to your wounds. And if you do that, then you can roll the total number of hit dice that you have. In this case, we only have 1, and that's how many hit points you get back. So you essentially heal. And so that's why they put it on here, because you're like, I'm going to take a long rest, or a short rest. I'm going to roll 1d12. I can roll only one of them to the first level, and that's how many I can heal, how many hit points I can heal. All right, so that's important. So we got that. Now we're good to go. Now the next thing that is probably the most important would be the skills, and I think that's where we're going to end. Well, we'll do passive wisdom too, but the skills is next. Now we go down here to proficiencies, which we do kind of, we might need to put in there, but I'm not going to put them in right now because you can sort of get away with it without it. Well, you know what? I'm going to put them in. All right, so the proficiencies tell you what you can use, and in this case, it's important because we need to know what armor we can use. So I always write it down here. I just write an armor. We can use light armor, and I just roll light. And then we can use medium armor. So I write that in, and we can use shields. So I write in shields. All right, now the next thing is weapons. So I write down here weapons. Simple weapons, and I'll show you what that is and when we get to that section. Simple and martial. Martial weapons are like, more advanced weapons, like you might use as a like a knight or something. Now, tools proficiencies, which I didn't write in there correctly. Tool proficiencies are things that you can do, that you can use when you're doing things like, like a trade or a skill or something like that. So tool proficiencies, it says none, but I'm not going to write none in there because this background thing will come into effect at some point and actually give us some tool proficiencies. Usually, I think almost all of them do, but maybe some don't. So I'm going to leave that blank instead of writing in none. Then the next part of this proficiency section is saving throws, but we've already done that. And then the next is skills. All right, so for skills, you're supposed to choose 2 from animal handling, athletics, intimidation, nature, perception, and survival. So we just got to pick one of those. Now, I will tell you that in the game, the things that will affect you in the game as far as like combat and that kind of stuff, or doing fancy stuff, would be like athletics, which would be things like, oh, I'm going to try to lift a rock, so it's super heavy, or I'm going to try to arm wrestle somebody or something like that. That would be our athletics. I'm going to take that just because I feel like this character is pretty athletic. Then, so that's one of them, and I'm going to fill the circle in to show that I'm proficient in it, athletics. Then I got to pick another one, and a really good one is always perception, but I'm not going to do this because I feel like this dwarf's not that perceptive. He's barbaric, but his wisdom's not all that great, so I'm going to say he's good at survival or nature. You know what? Let's make him just kind of tough. He's going to be intimidation. So he's a barbarian dwarf, and he's good at intimidating people. All right. My hair got in the way, so I had to splice this in here. I was focusing on my hair instead of on the skills. So I think we've actually filled in the proficiency. We picked our skills and filled in which one we're proficient in, which is athletics and intimidation. Now we just need to add in what our modifiers are for those skills. And the way it works is if you look at this, each skill, like acrobatics here, has in parentheses next to it what it's based on. So acrobatics is based on dexterity. It says DEX in the little parentheses next to it, kind of faded, but you can see it. So all you have to do to fill this out is go over here, figure out what the skill's based on, and then look for your modifier on it. So here, acrobatics is dex, which is short for dexterity. So I go over to dexterity, and I see my bonus for that is +2. I'm not proficient in it, so I just write the +2 in there. Animal handling, same thing. We look over here, it says whiz, which is short for wisdom. So we go to wisdom, and we see our modifier is +1. So we're going to put the +1 in there. Arcana is intelligence. That's a +0. And here we go. We get to one that we're proficient in. Athletics. So that's strength. And strength is a +3 for us, but we also have a proficiency bonus of +2. So we add those two together. +3, +2. That gives us a +5 for any skill that's athletics based. Now, next is deception. That's charisma. We have a +0. So we can just put a +0 in there. History is intelligence. It's a +1. Insight is wisdom, which is a +1. Wait, I had intelligence. Intelligence is a +0. Gotta be careful. So that's a +0 for history, because we're not proficient and it's based on intelligence. Now, insight is wisdom, and that's a +1. Then we have intimidation, which is charisma. We have a +0, but we're proficient in it. So we add this +2 in. So we have a +0, +2, which is +2. Next is investigation, which is intelligence. So we look at that, that's +0. Medicine, wisdom, that's a +1. Nature is intelligence, that's a +0. Perception is wisdom, that's a +1. Performance is cha, which is charisma, +0. Persuasion is cha, +0. Religion is intelligence, which is +0. And sleight of hand is dexterity, which is a +2 for us. Then there's stealth, which is also dexterity, so that's also a +2. And finally, survival, which is wisdom, +1. All right, there we go. So that's that, and I think that's where we're going to stop today. I don't know how to calculate passive wisdom. I could have taken the time to do that since I had to splice this video in, but we'll do passive wisdom later, and then we will also fill in all of your, we'll get equipment. And we may do background. I think we might have time to do background in the next one. But right now, you're pretty set to play the game. The thing that we don't really have is what your weapon proficiencies are and your attack bonuses and the damage and stuff like that from that. So we'll cover that next. And that pretty much gives you what you need. Then the background will give you some skills usually. And it'll give you some of these personality traits and ideals and stuff like that. But you don't necessarily need those to play the game. So next time we might make it a short video and just figure out your equipment, which would then determine your armor class, which is the other thing we haven't filled in, which is very important for the game. And then also it'll figure out like how much money you have, and then you'll be pretty much set to go. You'll be good to go for just your basic playing. Of course, you got to get your name and stuff. And then the next video we'll do background stuff. All right. Okay. Till next time. Keep them rolling.